welcome to the Truth and Data podcast, where each episode we talk about a different digital forensics topic. I'm Jessica.
I'm Kim.
And I'm Debbie.
And today we're going to be talking about digital evidence in cold cases. This is a really intriguing topic because people are always interested in cold cases. So I'll throw out to you, Debbie. Why do you think, or what do you think was kind of the impetus of why someone would go back and look at a case from a digital evidence perspective? What causes
Well,
that?
across the country, cold case squads are popping up. Some agencies have had cold case squads for a while. Some agencies are sort of have a renewed interest in cold cases. We always want to give closure to victims and their families. So I do think that, the concentration on cold cases is absolutely vital. But as far as, like concentrating on them, there's a review of the case file, but there's so much new technology, not just genetic genealogy. And in this case, we're going to be talking about digital forensics, but there is so much more that we can do now that we couldn't do 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that we need a fresh look at those cases to try and solve those cases and bring closure and justice to the victims.
Yeah, totally. Justice to the victims is critical, right? And we can even look at, cases where, like the BTK killer, how many years did that go on, right? And that person
Right.
was still was, that was solved by digital evidence.
Right.
We love that case. But and there is a great episode. I'll plug. There's a great episode of Stacy and Becky's podcast, Becky Passmore and Stacy Roundoff's podcast, where they interviewed the examiner from the BTK killer. So complete aside, can I remember the name of their podcast? No, but I'll put a link to it. That said, Kim, what are the types of changes in digital evidence that have allowed us as forensics examiners to contribute to cold case analysis?
Well, I think from the standpoint of just because our tools are evolving
Mm-hmm.
and because our understanding of that digital evidence is evolving, where you may have some digital evidence that's been on a involved with what is now a cold case that is unresolved, and so now maybe we've got a tool that can actually gain access to that particular device, or for whatever reason it may be that it just was not supported at the time, or we just didn't we weren't aware of how to do that, and or didn't have access to the tools. That's how
Right.
also that may be an issue for some agencies. Hopefully you are able to partner with other agencies if you are limited in your access of tools. But
That's interesting
definitely,
because
I think,
access means two different things here, right?
It
One, it
does.
can meet our physical knowledge base and existence of tools that can extract data from device X, be it a mobile phone, be it an IoT device or a sensor, be it a computer. So that's like access in terms of the technological, but also those tools that gain these capabilities come at an expense. So not every agency has physical access to those digital acquisition tools which access the data. So I just think that's great. And I do think it's wonderful that agencies compare and look at that.
Yeah,
But yeah.
I'll add to that just a little bit. There's agencies that don't even understand what
What,
what is possible.
right.
So, like just an understanding of digital evidence and what is possible is also new to some
Right.
people. It's not to everyone, but there are still agencies out there that don't quite understand what is even possible.
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that's exactly it. And every single day our tool vendors are coming out with new acquisitions. So I've definitely been in the lab where we had a device and we said, this isn't supported yet, but let's make a note of it. Let's put it back on the shelf. And when there's support, we can re-examine it. And sometimes support comes really quick. And sometimes the difference is in the state of the device, right? Like we may have support for the device if it's locked or unlocked. Sometimes it's just because later down the road, we learn information about how to access that device from another person. And what I mean is I've worked cases where we got passwords later.
Yes.
And that is, where maybe that device is supported if you have a password, not supported if you don't have a password. And when I say we get the password later, it's because of an unrelated thing by the same group or another investigation that goes, wait a second, Sally or Jimmy or whoever was part of the one-armed bandits, and the one-armed bandits keep using this phrase that's 1111 on all their devices. Have we tried that? I worked a case where we didn't have access to a phone because it was SIM card locked. So obviously this is an old case, and there was no access and nobody thought it was going to work. And then I went through the trash from the scene and found the SIM card frame because I'm not scared to get dirty and go through the trash, right? And I went through the trash and found the SIM card frame, which had the puck key on it. And we got into the device and it was a smoking gun. So, I mean, that wasn't cold for an extremely long time, but the agency that originally was working it had given up on it.
I worked on a case many years ago, and it was a case that it didn't go extremely cold, but it was cold enough.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the factors was that it was the very first full file system extraction I'd ever gotten.
Oh.
And it was when not very many people knew how to interpret and understand that data.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to, there were some portions of it that did make better sense than others, and some things are more obvious than others, right? There was enough for us to kind of keep some things in the back of our mind and to work with the investigators on. And so it did help. It was something else actually that ended up cracking the whole thing, but all of that actually dovetailed right into it, of what we were able, but I didn't understand every portion of it. I don't really think there was anything that would have been the smoking gun on it, but it was very interesting that it was a newer technology, which was great.
Right.
But if you, as we often have talked about, you got to know how to interpret the data and know when to depend on it and what it's actually telling you in order to be able to look at it. But like I said, afterward, and after there were some other questions that were answered, the case ended up being solved. That information that we got off of that full file system actually did dovetail perfectly into it. But yeah, it's oftentimes difficult to know.
And you just brought up a great point, because it's not just access that changes, it's understanding of artifacts that change. I remember when I figured out how usage stats and recent tasks worked on Android, and there wasn't anything public on that, and now that's used in every case, right? That's one of the first things people look at is what were the apps that were open and which apps were being used. And now that's just table stakes for how we look at cases, but it didn't used to be. And so having that helps you, changes in understanding of artifacts really is huge, because our knowledge and our understanding is always growing. And how many times have you been like, oh, I've seen that before, but I didn't know what it was at the time? How much would you love, Kim, to be able to go back and take that phone and run it through some tools now with the amount of wide support there is for full file system?
That would be absolutely amazing. And you actually maybe think of something else through there, is that we, I think many years ago, we had this feeling that you shouldn't go back and re-examine data, and I think that we can realize the importance of actually going back and looking at data again, because the tools do change. And if you're able to, articulate what's changed and are able to understand what the, benefit would be for you to do that, then absolutely, I feel like it's fine for you to go back, do another, examination of that data to be able to answer some questions that you may not have been able to answer before.
Right? Like release notes on tools are huge because they tell us what features the tool has added, what new applications it parses, what new system artifacts it parses. And it's one of the reasons we just have to keep so up to date on what's going on. All right. I have a cool question for both of you. What do you think is like the digital heyday of when we weren't getting data, but the things existed, we just didn't know about it, and we should go and like maybe rethink about data from that era?
I think you guys would know better than I would. Let me think about it while Kim answers, because I'm going to think about it from like a managerial
Sure.
perspective. So,
I mean, I think whenever I think smartphones were one of the first
100%.
the first pieces of evidence that, when I first got into digital evidence, we really didn't do much with phones. And then, that quickly changed. But it's also the phones themselves have changed.
Yes.
There wasn't that much data on the phone to get in the first place. And then when you find out, oh wow, there's all kinds of data on this new phone. Okay, well, how can we get the data off of it? And then how can we actually examine it? So to me, that was a huge game changer in terms of, and also everybody's got one in their pocket.
I actually have a specific time frame. I think the change in our knowledge in mobile forensic analysis to looking at system artifacts on Android and iOS. We weren't doing that prior to 2017. 2017, Apollo comes out, I do usage stats, recent tasks. Alexis Brignoni starts publishing some work. Josh Hickman comes in 2018, starts doing well-being dashboard, etc. And all of those artifacts exist on the phones from 2015 through 2017. So I think that cold cases from 2015 to 2017, so I'm talking 8 to 10 years ago, I honestly think our knowledge base and what our tools can do on those devices is greatly amplified versus what we were doing at that time. And then I would say, from a knowledge spreading perspective, I would probably even pull that into those cases from 2017, 2018. Because once we get into 2015, our phones are more expansive, kind of to your point, Kim, where they are collecting more data. So I think that 2015, 2018 realm is a period in which we have much greater knowledge now of system artifacts. And back then on mobile devices, we were looking just at contextual artifacts. So I'd love to see people reprocess cold cases from that period, from Android and iOS.
As I sit here and listen to you guys, I'm again thinking at it from a managerial perspective, say managing a lab. What processes do you put in place? So if you're saying, okay, 8 to 10 years ago, we know that this is going to continue. We know that we're going to advance in technology. We know that digital evidence is going to become more expansive. And so how do we store, what are the processes we need to put in place to store the digital evidence, and then and maybe it's a rhetorical question right now, but the processes to put in place to extract and store, and or put it on a shelf, or how often do we need to go back and re-examine? And then realistically, we already have a backlog. So
Sure.
going back and re-examining unless you have a cold case squad or a specific case you're working on, are people going to go back and look at old evidence?
I don't know that they are, but I would say there is an answer to the storage problem, and it's called the cloud.
Yes.
So I feel like the storage problem. I feel like this is much more something in your realm, Debbie, to answer than mine from a practitioner. But
I think it's probably a whole other podcast episode, but I guess I just wanted to throw it out there that these are considered, if we're going to talk about cold cases and moving forward, we know we're always going to have cold cases. We know we're always going to have digital evidence now. So how do we think about that moving forward? If it's unsolved right now, what do we need to do to preserve the evidence that we have so that in 3 years, maybe we can look at it again, or 5 years.
I mean, go ahead, Kim. Sorry.
You're going to have to look at one at agency policies and
Right.
what you're supposed to do. One, and two, the big thing that we always come back to is you need to be able to explain, or you need to share with folks that, hey, things are always changing. We may be able to find
Right.
something later. The other part
Right.
is that, again, looking at agency policy and what you're supposed to do with evidence, are they going to, let's say that, what if this digital evidence, that there's, quote, nothing on it, then is it going to be given back to a potential suspect?
Right.
Is it going to be given to a victim's family? What are we going to do with that? So
Right.
that is going to be huge. You can't go back later and ask for it back.
No.
Well, you can, but
Well,
It's going to be all,
it'll be
no telling
altered.
what,
There's
yeah.
you have no chain of custody at that point. I would say from an access perspective, if we that there is something we could be doing where if we have a device that we do not get the most complete acquisition, not the most complete acquisition at the time, the most complete acquisition, so on modern devices a full file system, we should be keeping track of the make, model, the operating system version, and the type of extraction we received or no. And if then comparing at least once a year, just running those cases where we did not get the most complete acquisition, or maybe every 6 months, just against the supported list, the new and updated supported list. And then we can go back and check those cases. And that's something we can do with, low manpower. You could probably script something just to compare those use cases, or even a manual review of that. We're talking just a couple of hours every 6 months. And I think that would be really, really beneficial from the access perspective.
Right.
When it's the other end, when it's did our body of knowledge change instrumentally? I mean, then it has to be something where, from a managerial perspective, where it's, I'm guessing, either one of these cold case squads, but these cold case squads need to be aware when they're determining which ones to dig into, where the digital evidence lies, in terms of its potentiality. And again, I'd throw back to that 2015 to 2018 window. If you have cold cases in that period, that's worth re-examining from a digital forensics perspective. To Kim's point, prior to 2010, the digital forensics is not as robust because smartphones come into, people's possessions in 2010, more commonplace by 2012. They're ubiquitous. So I would say, digital evidence could still, 100%, I am in no way saying not, digital evidence in a 2005 case could still be relevant because somebody had a flip phone or a candy bar phone, but it's not the same as what you're going to get in things once smartphones exist. And then smartphones get better and better and better. So they are worth looking at from a digital evidence perspective. But I think people knowing that our knowledge base had a major switch in mobile evidence in 2017, and that's why the 2015 to 2018 cases might want to be reran through tools, is something, maybe send this to your friendly cold case team.
Well, and I know that we're talking about mainly mobile phones, but I remember walking through our evidence room and seeing, desktops and laptops.
Oh, for sure.
On the shelves, and they had been sitting there for years. So I do, going back to those as well.
Yeah, and let's be honest, digital forensics is a game of cat and mouse. How many times have you been told digital evidence? Kim, how many times did you hear digital forensics was dead? Because I was told that it was dead because of encryption and BitLocker. And then I was told it was dead because of smartphones. And then I've been told, and passcodes. I've been told digital forensics is dead more times than I can count because it's a game of cat and mouse.
Yeah, I agree with that. Here's another thing though. We've talked about us having access to the proper tools, us as the examiner understanding and being able to get the proper data from it. Let's talk about what kinds of information that may lead you to other data. As in, what if you find out or could now find out about some account data? What if you find out they had a Gmail account? Well, maybe they're a person who's kept their Gmail account since 2005. And now we've got 20 years worth of data in there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
and
and
So good.
they think they've quote gotten away from it. I mean, or gotten away with it. I mean, who knows, right?
you're right. And we
Um,
weren't always taking cloud accounts. And we might not, you may have had changes in your authorities issues because we didn't understand cloud at the beginning. So you might have had been in an environment where people were hesitant to acquire cloud data. So it wasn't acquired, but now you're in a different
Hmm.
time and understanding of that data. So our understanding changed. So our legal acceptance changed.
I
And maybe
remember
now
that
that's something we could
debate.
do. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember that debate too.
Uh-huh.
That's what,
Yeah.
but I had actually forgotten about it. And that's the kind of
Hmm.
thing we need to think about in terms of these cold cases. It's such a brilliant point, Kim,
It
that
is a good
there's
point.
these external data sources. Also, when did we start collecting IoT devices? I would say we still don't. I mean,
We don't.
I teach an
Not
IoT
not
class,
regularly. They are not
and
they are not
I mean,
collected
we're
regularly.
getting better with things like requesting data from Ring doorbells
Right.
from the vendor. We're getting better about that. We're definitely getting better about cameras, but there are sensors everywhere and they have so much data. Not always it's relevant, but oftentimes it is. And how are we looking at those data sources? And those, I mean, there's sensors in the environment. Also, I mean, that's another good point. How often are we looking to, um, how often did we look up and correlate, Kim, when you're talking about accounts, back when, how often were we doing the OSINT to say what other accounts have this username? What other, right? And doing
Right.
that open source intelligence on cases and on cold cases, that could be really critical. And luckily, we have things like the Wayback Machine, the digital internet archive that we could dig into. So I don't feel like OSINT was as utilized
It wasn't.
in older times, so it might be another avenue for cold cases that
right.
pertains
Or
to digital
just
evidence.
and the tools also that a lot of
Oh,
folks
for
would use
sure.
within that realm, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's just there's so much that's evolved.
Endless. Almost
Yes,
endless now.
absolutely. But yeah, I would love to yeah, I would love it if we all did have that information way back then. But things evolve and things are going to evolve from here too. So
100%.
you can put a pin in this and we can come back and listen to it in whatever time frame down the road and we'll be saying, hey, too bad we didn't know about XYZ then.
10 years from now, we'll be saying, you know which cases we need to relook at? We need to look at those cold cases for 2023 to 2026 because we didn't have this big understanding of this whole new concept that we can apply to digital evidence. And I think that that's really just critical. So, yeah, we've got a lot to go. And I think that it's important that we do look at these cases that were written off. I love this because we came up with a solution to at least look at keep access logs for devices we can't access.
Sure.
I
And,
like. Go ahead. Sorry.
even just like a formalized archiving policy and
Oh
regular
yeah.
auditing and validation, like, and again, every agency is going to have to do this for themselves, come up with their own procedure or policy, but, and continuous staff training, just trying, planning for the future.
Okay, that's a brilliant point. Continual training because that's the only way you're going to find out about these new learnings
Right.
that you can apply to older cases or even
Right.
current cases. One of the scariest things to me is when the concept comes out, well, we sent you to training, you're already certified, you never need to train again. And in this field, that is really scary. You don't need to take, sometimes it even makes sense to take the same course again 5 years later because it's
Yes.
completely different. I mean, as somebody who writes, training, if I look at my class at George Mason, I look at what I'm teaching in 2025 versus 2026, I mean, 2016, that's a different course 10 years on. Even Hexordia's content 4 years on, we've ripped entire modules out. We put in entire new modules in the same courses. We've taken courses and made them double the length, because understanding is always changing. So it's a really good point, Debbie, that continual training is the only way you can keep up with things. And, leave it to people like Kim and I who are just running around trying to keep up with everything so we can make sure that we're testing it and then educating other people on it. But very cool, very important topic. And we'd love to hear from you and about what you're doing to solve your cold cases and what are the interesting areas in your cold cases. Thanks so much for joining. Bye, all.
Bye.
Bye.